The note was written in crayon, but the handwriting at the bottom wasn't a kid's. I'd been delivering mail on the Linden Heights route for 10 years, and in 10 years, a lot of things have been handed to me at mailboxes. Cookies at Christmas, complaints about the Henderson's dog, one memorable summons I had to explain I was not legally able to refuse. But never a note in purple crayon, run out to the curb by a 6-year-old in rain boots and a tutu, who thrust it at me like it was a matter of national importance and then stood there waiting, vibrating, for me to read it. "Do you eat lunch alone?" it said, in big, careful crayon letters. "Mommy does. She eats by the window when you come. Do you want to not eat alone? Hazel, age 6. And then, at the bottom, in smaller handwriting, in pen, in the unmistakable script of an adult who had clearly not authorized this and was watching from somewhere with her heart in her throat. "Hazel, I told you not to. I'm so sorry. Please ignore this. She's 6. M." I stood at the curb of 14 Linden Heights, holding a crayon note that a small girl and her mortified mother had apparently both contributed to, and I did the only thing a reasonable man can do in that situation, which is look up at the house where a curtain in the front window was very obviously, very recently, dropped. "She saw you read it," Hazel reported, delighted. "She's hiding now. She does that." I'm Caleb Ruiz. I'm 36. I've been a letter carrier for 12 years, 10 of them on the Linden Heights route, and that crayon note was about to rearrange my entire, quiet life. Let me tell you what a mail route is, because most people don't think about it. It's the most intimate, anonymous relationship in the world. I know things about Linden Heights. I know whose magazines say something about a midlife crisis. I know which houses get the medical bills and which get the wedding invitations. I know the Petersons are drowning in catalogs, and the man at number 9 hasn't gotten a personal letter in 3 years, and the widow at number 22 still gets mail addressed to her late husband, and I've learned to slip those to the bottom of the stack so she doesn't see his name first thing. I know my street the way you know a song you've heard 10,000 times. Not the words exactly, but the shape of it, the rhythm, the places it goes quiet. And I knew, in the vague way you know things on a route, about the woman at number 14. Single, I'd gathered. The mail told me, the way it tells you everything. The slow shift from 2 names to 1 over a couple of years. A little girl. The packages that come when you're doing it alone. The practical stuff. The kids' shoes. The cheaper brand of everything. I knew her the way I knew all of them. A name on envelopes. A hand, sometimes waving from a doorway. A life I delivered to but didn't live in. I'd watched it happen through the mail, actually, the way her household changed. For my first years on the route, number 14 got 2 names, hers and a man's. Then, over about a year, the man's mail started shifting. A forwarding order, then nothing. Then the slow scrub of a person leaving a house through the things that stop coming for them. I'd seen it a dozen times on a dozen routes. You learn to read a divorce in the mail the way a doctor reads an X-ray. The wedding catalogs stop. The bills consolidate to one name. The cheerful joint magazines lapse and aren't renewed. And then it's just her and a kid and the practical packages. And you tuck the occasional piece of his still arriving mail to the bottom of the stack the same way you do for the widow at 22, because some names are hard to see first thing in the morning, whether the person's dead or just gone. So I knew number 14 was a woman alone with a kid, the way I knew everything, distantly, kindly, through paper. What I did not know, what the crayon note informed me, was that she ate lunch by the front window. When I came, that my noon delivery to Linden Heights coincided with a woman sitting at her window with a sandwich, watching the mailman come up the street. I'm not going to pretend I didn't feel something about that, because here's the part I hadn't told anyone, the part that made a 6-year-old's crayon note land like a stone in a still pond. I ate lunch alone, too, every day. In the postal truck, parked at the turnaround at the top of Linden Heights, a sad sandwich and a thermos. 12 years of solitary lunches in a parked vehicle. And I'd been doing it long enough, alone enough, that I'd stopped thinking of it as lonely and started thinking of it as just the shape of my days. I'd been divorced 4 years. No kids. A quiet apartment. A quiet route. A quiet life I'd told myself I preferred because preferring it was easier than admitting I'd just stopped trying. My marriage had ended the boring way. Not a betrayal, not a fight. Just two people who'd slowly become roommates and then strangers. And one day, she said she wanted more, and I realized I didn't even have the energy to ask more of what. And that was that. After, I'd folded myself down into the root. The root asked nothing of me. The root never left. And now there was a crayon note asking if I ate lunch alone too, from a little girl whose mother ate by the window when I came. "What's your name?" I asked Hazel, because it was the only thing I could think to do that wasn't bolting. "Hazel, it says on the note, age 6. She pointed at it, in case I'd missed the credential. "What's your name?" "Mommy doesn't know it. She just calls you the mailman. She says, 'The mailman's coming,' and then she sits at the window. Every day. With her sandwich." From inside the house, faintly, I heard a sound that might have been a woman dying of embarrassment behind a curtain. "My name's Caleb," I said. "Caleb!" Hazel bellowed toward the house, at a volume that suggested she had no concept of indoor and outdoor voices. "His name is Caleb. Mommy, the mailman is Caleb." The front door opened, and the woman from number 14 came out. And I'd seen her before, 100 times. A wave from a doorway, a face at a window, but I'd never looked because she'd been a name on envelopes, and I'd been the man who delivered them. Now I looked. She was about my age, dark hair pulled back in the harried way of a single mom mid-morning, wearing the specific expression of a person whose child has just betrayed them to the United States Postal Service. "I'm so sorry," she said, coming down the walk. Hazel, we talked about this. She found me writing in my journal. I write these dumb little... It's not important. The point is, she saw something private and decided to take matters into her own hands. And I caught her halfway out the door, but not before she stopped, took a breath, mortified past the point of sentences. "Hi, I'm Marisol. I'm so sorry my 6-year-old ran out and asked the mailman about his lunch habits. She also told me you eat by the window when I come," I said, "and that you've been calling me the mailman and sitting down with a sandwich at noon for how long, exactly?" Marisol closed her eyes. "Hazel." "What? You do?" "I'm aware of what I do, baby. You don't have to." Marisol opened her eyes, and there was nothing left to do but be honest, because her daughter had napalmed every available exit. "Okay, fine. Yes. I eat lunch by the front window. And yes, it happens to be around when you come up the street." And the journal thing she read said, her cheeks went crimson. It doesn't matter what it said. It said, "I wonder if the mailman is lonely too," Hazel supplied helpfully. I read it. I can read now. It said that, and then it said, "I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to." And then it stopped, because that's where you stopped writing, Mommy. You should finish your sentences. Hazel rose. And I, 12 years a letter carrier, 4 years divorced, a man who ate sad sandwiches in a parked truck and had stopped calling it lonely, stood at the curb of 14 Linden Heights and felt something crack open in my chest that I'd had sealed for a very long time. "I eat lunch alone," I said, to Marisol. Over the head of her daughter, who had finally, blessedly, run out of journal to quote, "Every day, in my truck, at the top of the street, parked at the turnaround. 12 years of sandwiches in a parked vehicle. So," I held up the crayon note. The answer to Hazel's question is yes. I do eat lunch alone too. And the answer to the part she didn't get to read, the "I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to" part, I don't know how your sentence ends, but I'd like to. Marisol stared at me. Hazel, sensing the adults had reached the good part, went suspiciously quiet for the first time all morning. My sentence, Marisol said faintly. You wrote, I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to, and then stopped. I'm a mailman, Marisol. I deliver finished sentences for a living. Tell me how it ends. It took her a second, but she was braver than her journal gave her credit for. I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to ask the mailman to eat lunch with me instead of both of us eating alone 20 feet apart, she said, all in a rush, looking like the words cost her something. That's how it ends. That's the dumb sentence my daughter read and decided to finish for me with a crayon. Caleb, this is humiliating, but I've been sitting at that window watching you come up the street for like a year thinking, there's a person who looks as tired and alone as I feel, and never once doing anything about it. Because what do? Flag down the mail truck. Excuse me, postal worker, would you like to be less lonely? There's no normal way to do that. So your 6-year-old did it for you. So my 6-year-old did it for me. In crayon. Oh my God. She put her face in her hands. I'm going to have to move. Or, I said, you could just have lunch. She looked up. I take my lunch at noon, I said. At the turnaround, 20 feet from your window apparently, which I now can't unknow. And I have been doing it alone for 12 years and telling myself I liked it. I gestured vaguely at the truck, the rote, the whole solitary shape of my life. I don't think I like it. I think I just stopped expecting anything else. And then your kid handed me a crayon note, and I realized I've been eating lunch alone, within sight of a woman who's also been eating lunch alone, both of us pretending it was fine, for a year. Marisol, that's insane. We could just not do that. You want to have lunch with me because my daughter ambushed you with a crayon. I want to have lunch with you because I read the note and looked up at your window and the curtain dropped. And something about a woman hiding behind a curtain after her kid told the truth she was too scared to tell. I stopped. I haven't wanted to do anything in 4 years. I want to have lunch with you, tomorrow, noon. You bring your sandwich, I'll bring mine, and we eat them at the same table instead of 20 feet and 1 window apart. That's the whole ask. Marisol was quiet. Hazel looked between us with the intensity of a tiny referee. Okay, Marisol said. Tomorrow, noon. A breath. But I'm warning you, Hazel will be there, and she has no filter, and she's already read my journal, so you should know, going in, that there are no secrets in this family. None. She'll tell you everything. He already knows you think he looks tired and nice, Hazel confirmed. It's in the journal. Tired and nice. Page 4. Page 4, I said. I'm going to have to move, Marisol said again, weakly. But she was smiling now, and so was I, at the curb, holding a crayon note, 12 years of lunches about to end. We had lunch the next day, and the day after, and it became the thing. Noon, Marisol's kitchen table, 2 sandwiches that slowly became 1 shared spread as the weeks went on, Hazel narrating the 3 of us in a sunlit kitchen instead of 2 adults alone within sight of each other. We went slow because there was a kid, and because Hazel had already lost a father to the slow drift of a marriage ending, and neither of us would risk her on something careless. But slow didn't mean small. Slow meant a lunch that ran long. Slow meant Marisol started timing her break to mine. Officially now, no pretense. Slow meant I started taking a real lunch instead of a sad truck sandwich, started looking forward to noon the way I hadn't looked forward to anything in years. I learned her over those lunches. She was a freelance bookkeeper, worked from home, which was why she was at that window every noon. The isolation of working alone in a house, a single mom with no coworkers, no water cooler, nobody to eat with but a 6-year-old at school all day. You don't know lonely until you work from home alone in the same house where your marriage ended, she said. The window was the mail truck coming was the only reliable thing in my day. A person, outside, doing a normal human thing every day at noon. I'm not proud of how much it meant. It was a mailman driving by. But it was the one moving piece of my day that wasn't me and Hazel and the silence. I used to park at that turnaround because it was the quietest spot on the route, I told her. No houses right there, just the dead end. I picked it on purpose, the loneliest spot to eat the loneliest lunch. I shook my head, and the whole time I was parking there for the quiet, you were 20 feet away at a window wishing the quiet would end. We were so close. A crayon away. A crayon away, she agreed. The lunches built their own small world over those weeks. Hazel appointed herself the social director, which mostly meant she'd interrogate me over sandwiches about things no adult would ask. Did I have a favorite house on the route? I did, number 30. They put out a bench for me in summer. Had I ever been bitten by a dog? Twice. Both Chihuahuas. The big ones are all bark. What was the weirdest thing I'd ever delivered? A live cricket farm, do not ask. And Marisol would sit across the table laughing at her daughter running a full deposition on the mailman, and I'd catch her eye over Hazel's head, and the kitchen would feel less like a room two lonely people were borrowing, and more like a place that had been waiting for a third chair to fill. I started bringing things. Not big things. That's not the root. The root is small kindnesses. A particular bread Marisol had mentioned liking. A book for Hazel that had come through the sorting facility's giveaway bin. A second coffee, because I'd learned she took it the same wrong way I did. Too much sugar, no apology. And Marisol started doing the same back. A real lunch instead of just a sandwich. Then a thermos of soup on cold days handed up to the truck window on the mornings I was running behind. Then, Friday, a note tucked into her outgoing mail for me to find on my own route. Window seats reserved. Don't be late. M. I kept that one in my breast pocket for a week. The street noticed, because of course the street noticed, I'd been their mailman for 10 years, and now I was eating lunch at number 14 every day, and a street like Linden Heights misses nothing. Mrs. Abbott, the widow at 22, caught me at her mailbox one afternoon and put her hand on my arm. "You've been having lunch with the young mother at 14, she said. Not a question. Hazel's mom. I have. Good. Mrs. Abbott's eyes were sharp and kind. You know, Caleb, you've put my Frank's name at the bottom of my mail for 4 years. You think I never noticed? Every day, 4 years, you make sure I don't see his name first thing in the morning." Her voice wavered. A man that gentle with an old woman's grief shouldn't be eating lunch alone in a truck. I've watched you park at that dead end for a decade. I'm glad somebody finally went and got you. She patted my arm. Tell Marisol the whole street approves. We took a vote at the block party. It wasn't close. I drove the rest of the route that day with something warm and unfamiliar sitting in my chest. The feeling of a street that had been quietly watching out for me, the way I'd been quietly watching out for them. The complication, when it came, was mine. A wobble about 2 months in, when the thing got real enough to scare me. Because here's what happens when you've spent 4 years folded down small. The moment something good shows up, the old voice starts whispering that you'll ruin it, that you're a tired man who eats sandwiches in a truck, that Marisol and Hazel deserve someone with more to offer than a mail route and a quiet apartment, that the smart move, the safe move, is to coast it gently, back to lunch buddies before anybody's heart gets involved. I started pulling back, shorter lunches, a couple of busy route today texts, the careful retreat. Marisol caught it because she'd spent a year reading me through a window and knew my tired face better than I did. "You're doing a thing," she said, on the porch one evening after Hazel was down. You've gone quiet, and you keep finding reasons the lunches have to be short. You're backing out. And I need you to tell me why, because I left a marriage where a man backed out slowly without ever saying why, and I'm not doing that again. Not even with you. Especially not with you. And I almost gave her the easy lie, but she'd been brave enough to finish her sentence at the curb with her whole street able to hear, and I owed her the same. You and Hazel deserve more than a guy who eats lunch in a truck, I said. That's the honest version. You built a whole life on your own. You're raising this incredible kid, and I'm a 40-hour-a-week mailman who folded himself down so small after his divorce that he eats sandwiches at a dead end on purpose. The old voice keeps telling me you'll figure out I'm not enough, and that it'll hurt less if I back it down to lunch before you do. I made myself look at her. So I started backing it down. And you caught me. And I'm sorry, because it's not fair to you, and it's not even true. It's just the voice, but it's loud. Marisol was quiet. Then she reached over and took my hand. Caleb, you delivered the widow at number 22's mail with her dead husband's name at the bottom of the stack for years, so she wouldn't see it first. Hazel told me she heard Mrs. Abbott say it at the block party, that the mailman always tucks Frank's name to the bottom. Her voice was thick, a man who thinks about a stranger's grief that carefully is not a man with nothing to offer. You've been delivering small kindnesses to this whole street for 10 years and calling it a job. I don't want more than you. You're already more than the man who taught me to expect less. She squeezed. The voice is a liar. I left a marriage to a man who actually didn't have enough. Not enough interest, not enough effort, not enough wanting. You're the opposite. You have so much you've just been parking it at a dead end. I held her hand on that porch, and the old voice, for the first time in 4 years, went quiet. That was 2 years ago. I still run the Linden Heights route. Wouldn't give it up. It's my street. I know its whole song. But I don't eat lunch at the turnaround anymore. I eat it at 14 Linden Heights at a kitchen table with Marisol, who I married last fall, and Hazel, who is 8 now and takes complete credit for the entire relationship on the grounds that she's the one who wrote the note. Which is fair. She did write the note. The crayon note is framed in our hallway. Do you eat lunch alone? Mommy does. Do you want to not eat alone? Hazel, age 6. Underneath it, Marisol framed the journal page, the real one, the one Hazel read aloud to the entire curb. I wonder if I'll ever be brave enough to... Except now there's a second line under it, added later in Marisol's pen. I was. His name is Caleb. He delivers finished sentences. I think about the window a lot. A year, she said. A year of a woman sitting at her front window at noon with a sandwich, watching a tired mailman come up the street, both of us alone, 20 feet and 1 pane of glass apart, neither brave enough to do the one obvious human thing. We'd have gone on like that forever, I'm sure of it. 2 lonely people inside of each other, calling it fine, until I changed routes, or she moved, and the small, daily, not-quite meeting just stopped. And we'd each have spent the rest of our lives thinking there was a mailman once, and there was a woman at a window once. It took a 6-year-old with a purple crayon and no concept of an indoor voice to close the 20 feet. Sometimes the bravest person in the whole story is the one too young to know yet that you're supposed to be afraid of the true thing. Hazel just saw 2 lonely people and a solvable problem, and solved it, in crayon, at the curb, at the top of her lungs. Thank God for kids who read their mother's journals. What would you have done if a child handed you a note that said out loud the thing 2 lonely adults had both been too scared to say? Have you ever been close enough to touch someone's life every day, and still somehow 20 feet and 1 window away from actually meeting them? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one reached you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.